Honorable Chairman of the Trustees, Board of Trustees, uh, Honorable former Minister of Youth and Sports, and Honorable Director General of the NGF, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen here. So, as you already heard, I work at the World Bank, and I'm here in front of you because my family and my government invested in my education when I was young. And that's true of many of you, I think. That are younger, that are older, that's true. And in my case, in fact, my parents didn't go to school. So for that reason, I think the public investment, the government investments are so key. Okay. And many of you would agree that important investment individuals or families or countries make for their future generations. So with that in mind, let's talk about Nigeria a little bit. Nigeria, I see the good and not so good, right? On the good side, what I say is families are generally aware of the importance of education. And for that reason, they contribute 70% of overall education expenditure in Nigeria. That's huge if you compare to other countries. On the not so good side, this is clearly not sustainable. That families continue to put up that much as a share of overall. Nigeria, having high poverty rates, is basically excluding many poor children from coming to school because they cannot afford. So that's one point. And one of the reasons I think we will discuss more perhaps is that the national government spending on education is only 1.2% of GDP. And that's one of the lowest globally. Comparable share for lower middle income countries is 4.2%. And then, as we already heard, it's only about 10% of overall government spending. And that's even high because, of course, comparable figure percent, the global benchmark set by UNESCO, but 10% looks to be too good because the overall revenue generation of the country is so low, only 7% of GDP, right? So you see all the issues that are there. I'm not going to go into that. I think we'll hopefully find another forum and the macro people to talk about that, right? So I mean, what can Nigeria do, right? What can Nigeria do with this situation? I think one is obviously to increase education level or level of education financing, public funding. And some of the estimates say that the country has to increase public funding by 400% if it were to achieve SDG goals by 2030, which really means 1.2% of GDP to 6% of GDP. 400% means, so increase by 4.8, then 1.26% of GDP. Of course, that's easier said than done. It's not going to happen overnight. It should be a gradual process, clearly. But it's not only that. I think it's not only about increasing the level of allocation, but also how do you increase efficiency in allocation and spending? I think that's the other part we need to look at. So let's look at the level, right? So I wanted to quickly mention about the PMS subsidy the government spends, the premium motor spirit they call, right? That's annually, that is about the same in terms of the share of GDP that's allocated to education. If the country were to remove that or move away from that very pro-rich subsidy, then it could easily double the investment in education because it's the same share. So that's one way to look at it. Again, the bank has been in discussion with the government, and it's a very difficult political process, right? And I don't say that it's an easy process, but the point is we have to point that out. PMS subsidy is very, very rich. Only 3% of households in the bottom 40% of the income distribution buy petrol. Only 3%. 90% is bought by the rich people. So you can see why it's clearly not a subsidy for the poor. Okay, let's talk about efficiencies, right? Efficiencies. Maybe we should touch upon teachers because that is perhaps the most important factor for access and learning, but also important because more than 85%, let's talk about basic education, school education, 85% of public resources go to this particular teacher, teaching force, their salaries and other aspects, right? So what can be done? We already heard earlier, there are not enough teachers in the country, clearly. The average people teacher ratio is 65 from 2018 2019. Maybe it's gone worse now. The acceptable norm is 40. But the other part is the distribution is highly unequal. In the south, it could be 20, some states, and in the north, it's more than 100. But it's not only across the state that sort of the inequality, but within state, there's a huge variation. Some LGAs, some schools are quite rich in that, there are more teachers and some don't. So one way to think about it is, can the states of the government, the states of the federal government, can they do a careful exercise of reviewing this more carefully, teaching force, teaching workforce planning for next 5 years, 10 years, and think about not only increasing that workforce, but also redeploying that in areas where you need them more. And that will hopefully increase the efficiency and equity. Again, easier said than done. It's a topic many teachers may not like, but it's something we need to think about and be brave enough to tackle, I think. And we already heard today, Nigeria is one of those countries with one of the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. You mentioned 20 million, that's for primary and secondary. It's a very large number. In fact, it may have gone up in the last few years, even 5 years, a few years because of COVID, but because of other things you mentioned, security situation and other aspects, maybe even poverty. And I also wanted to mention, on learning, there's some numbers for Nigeria, but in the West and Central Africa, more than 80% of children aged 10 cannot read a simple text, a passive age-appropriate text. And I'm sure the figure for Nigeria is similar. And this is a crisis. This is a learning crisis that the World Bank has been talking about, and we need to sort of advocate for this. How do you tackle this? So I'm very glad that we have partners and CSOs who are in this room. But it's not only about out-of-school children, but those who are in school, they're not learning anything, as you can see. So how do you tackle this essentially, right? I mean, from the World Bank's perspective, one of the things that we always talk about is increased investment in early childhood education. It's a long-term, but most impactful investment you could think of. Today, I think the country really invests in just 1 year of ECD. It's not enough. And even that is highly unequal. I mean, in the South and for the rich, it's okay. For the North and the poor, same thing in foundational learning. I already talked about the learning crisis. And let's not but the level of skill sets or skills that graduates coming out of tertiary or technical education in universities are also not that great. And that's why you see, unemployment issues, underemployment issues, even though rates of return to education are high. So why is there a mismatch? So I think we need to think about that. And then one point I wanted to make here is, because it's one thing to talk about think about governance and accountability to sort of reduce leakages or to make teaching more effective, or finding data systems or monitoring systems so that teachers show up in school. Some data say 15 to 20% of teachers don't show up at school. Even if they show up at school, they're not going to classrooms. That's even more important. That's called time and task, right? You know, do you have enough? I mean, what are teachers doing in terms of even if they're at school? I think that's also quite important to monitor. Do we have good monitoring systems? So can we learn from other countries? And at some point, I wanted to, there are a number of these intervention funds, right? There's the UBEC intervention, the TET fund. For instance, I think all of them, we should be revisiting them for funding formula, but also thinking about how do you make it more equitable or more performance oriented. I'm sure we could talk about it, but can we really do it? And I think the dialogue would be to really work with these institutions to think what are possible ways of revising these, to make it more sustainable in the future. And finally, of course, I wanted to say this. I'm looking forward to the discussion today at this national dialogue. I want to thank obviously the policy house for organizing this, and thank you for inviting me and my colleague Tunde, who will be part of the panel. And from the World Bank side, I wanted to say we will very much support partners like you, CSOs like you, and obviously the federal government and the state governments. That's our job. This is our mandate, supporting on this cause and many other things. As you know, we cover all levels: primary, secondary, technical, and tertiary. We have projects, but we also have and happy to be part of this dialogue really, and look forward to the discussion. And thank you and good luck.
Thank you so much. So at this point, I would like to invite the chairman of Governors Forum. He's DG. Yeah, the DG of Governors Forum, sir, please. Apologize. Please, a round of
All right, thank you. Wow, this the protocol established by Mr. Kurile. And then to especially recognize the World Bank, your presence here, and preparedness to work with the organization. And then also recognize our former minister. I don't know how many of you have read his book. These experiences, yeah. And then, of course, I see a number of other very familiar faces, honorable and all that. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I sincerely appreciate you inviting us to this and calling again. I mean, the follow-up. It was former chief of staff. I was shocked. I got, apart from the letter and normal invitation, I got another call yesterday asking me. I mean, that's what we do with our principals, the governors. You just have to stay at it. Well, I'm supposed to deliver a short goodwill message, and I just want to highlight a couple of things, but I want to start by stating that we're excited to be here. You can see the caliber of people put together. It's not how many people, but the quality of people. I mean, and it speaks to what we're supposed to be doing here today. I agree with the World Bank rep that education is at the heart of virtually everything. It should be number one priority. If as a statesman or a politician, you think you can do anything, leave any legacy without prioritizing education, it's simply a waste of time. I mean, seriously. I also agree with the World Bank that very biased subsidy regime that is not helping this country anyway. We just need the political will to take the next step. I know there are a lot of implications around this. It's been tough. I mean, but it's something I think we should completely do away with. I thank the organizers. I want to thank you for putting this together. I want to also state that education and health are priority areas for the Nigerian Governors Forum. I want to also announce our readiness to work with you, partner with you anytime. I mean, you're ready. Of course, you know the country is going through a transition period. I mean, it's the level of attention from our principals. It's tough these days, but of course the secretariat is there. You have a permanent bureaucracy servicing the 36 state governors, and we're ready to work with you. I mean, just anytime. We're doing a number of work with the World Bank right now and a number of other development partners like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and around issues like this. There's the Agile program we are keyed on, and I think we will be available to make some of these things happen. There's a prepared speech here, and I think we have literally covered virtually everything except to emphasize the fact that there's need to rework our funding model for education. I think that seriously. I know I am graduate of Ife. I graduated from Ife and Ibadan. I mean, and I understand, of course, I mean, it's easy to say when you were in school, you literally enjoyed scholarship, all sorts of scholarships. In Ife, then, I mean, depending on your GPA, you are termed a university scholar, and you just enjoy one kind of scholarship or the other. I mean, I can't remember my father paying tuition anytime. But the truth is that things have changed, and there's need for us to factor that and then look for ways to rework our funding model for education. I also would want to suggest that at the tertiary level, it's important we begin to look at the place for endowments and grants. I mean, we're not taking that. I mean, when you hear Harvard, #1 institution in the country, in the world, it's not just because of the quality of people there. It's because they have a reserve. I mean, pulled together by majority of their ex-students, ex-Harvard students. That's the truth. The endowment fund for Harvard today is about $53 billion. You could go online, check that, $53 billion. That's bigger than what the budget of our country. In fact, it's bigger than what you can pull together in Africa. That's just for one school. I mean, if you were to look at the top 10 schools around the world, it's either based on the quality of people out there or the size of their endowment. Right now, I don't know if you have any institution in the country with 10 million naira endowment. Reward the funding for education in the country and across all segments. It's what we're doing right now is simply not sustainable, and we all have to accept that. Finally, I sincerely think that it's important we focus on what happens at the lower level, at the lower level, because between 1 and 5, you just discover that what you are able to inject in a child, I mean, it lives with the child for the rest of his life. I mean, that's the basic truth. Once you miss it at that point, I mean, you're gone. So we have to start thinking of how to invest heavily in our kids, especially between 0, not even 1, between 0 and maybe 10 and 15. Thank you, organizers. I mean, like I've said, we're here for you all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Another round of applause for him, please. We can do better. Please, can we stream the EU person online for the goodwill messages, please? I think we're having a technical problem. That would have been mine. Growing up, we all built sandcastle. It was a lofty dream. I wonder if kids still do that. But because of the situation of the country now, I don't know how much of sandcastle we built. I mean, to get to where we want to, because these days we have termites and snakes and what have you. I mean, reviewing our vouchers very not good. So while we're waiting, are we having tech? Yeah, talk here is actually terrible. Yes.
does the spending. I was commissioner for education in Kwara State, and I know that sitting in my office and I have to decide classrooms to renovate hundreds of kilometers away. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So the question of who does the spending is also important. So if we are able to, and I mean, simple policy, common sense, that you put resources where result is most expected. I mean, if schools are the center of your where you expect result, then it makes sense that you put resources in the schools, right? And that's why that's what the model for the private schools. That's why they are getting it right, because the resources are school-based, not allocated somewhere some hundreds of kilometers away in one big man's office and all that. So these are the questions that we have to ask as who does the actual spending. Then the last question is, how do we want to measure returns on investment? How do we know if we are actually getting value for money? How do we define value for money in terms of the kind of spending that we are making? But we cannot continue to measure our spending outcome based on how many classrooms we have built, how much money we have spent. Oh, I'm allocating these billions of naira to education. That means I'm taking education seriously. If that's the measurement, then we're not going to get the kind of result, because all that money can evaporate, and it still will go down on record that you have voted that money for education. So I think the point we like to make here is that in talking about how to transform education spaces, I think one of the key points here will be how do we transform education spaces into governance spaces? How do we ensure that schools are able to manage resources and to be able to deliver on results? The key idea, the key thrust here is decentralization. To what extent can we realize? And more decentralization is always better. And I think it was Land Pritchett, this guy in Harvard, that talked about the starfish system. When you have the starfish system rather than the spider system, the starfish system operates on the system of embedded autonomy, where each limbs are linked as autonomous of one another, so that when one limb has a problem, it doesn't ground the entire to what is called the spider system, where everything is controlled from the center. So I think the more decentralization we have, for everyone. So I think some of the questions we also need to ask is, should we continue to leave the most important level of our education is basic education, like Dr. Caro has said, but should we continue to leave the most important level of our education to arguably the weakest tier of our government? Because we said the basic education is a response. That's a constitutional prescription that the local government. We know that for most of our states in this country today, the local government has. So should we continue to leave the most important aspect of this education to the weakest tier? And that's the question we should also ask ourselves. And the last point on this issue of higher education, the question there, why should we continue to expand access to university education? The majority of your children cannot even read. An average 10-year-old child attending there today cannot read, which means that those who can read private schools, their parents are paying. So their parents are buying money today. Your child cannot even get basic education. So the question therefore is, why should we establish these universities, expand access to university education? Of your children cannot read. And like Dr. Okaro said, any cognitive skills you don't at a particular stage in so I think these are the questions that we must ask ourselves as we this conversation this morning. There will always be more knowledge outside government than within government. So the question will also, government has the convening authority, but government cannot catch up with the rate at which knowledge is being produced. Now, how do we create a funnel the knowledge back into government? Whatever conversation you are going to have in this room this morning, what are the likely off-takers of the issues of the conclusions and the knowledge that you are going to get? Because, I mean, in this room, you can generate the problem. But in the end, how do they feed back into the system of those who have the convening authority to deliver? So, like I said, filling in for Dr. Fayemi. If I've said anything that you don't like, those are mine. If I've said anything that you like, I miss. So it's my pleasure on behalf of Dr. Fayemi, the governor of Ekiti, to declare this dialogue open. Thank you very much.
Please clap for the governor. Thank you, sir, Balaji Abdullahi. I've read your work, so justice to this, and I know Dr. Fayemi would also do same if he was here. You were representing him. Please, a round of applause for him. So are we ready to bring in EU person? Okay, so I'm going to introduce Kate Kenneby. She's head of cooperation for European Union for her goodwill messages. Okay. I think you may unmute your mic, ma. Please. Okay, from my end. Please, if you can hear us, please unmute your mic. Can you unmute her from your end? I think it's doable. Yes, it's doable. Okay. Okay. Can you send her a message?
She has a headphones on that so she can hear you.
Hmm?
She has a headphones on so she should be able to hear you.
Yeah.
Phone's dying.
Ma, can you remove your headphones? Can you try doing that? Unplug your device. Unplug your device. Remove the. Okay, so okay, disconnect your. resolve this technical problem? Can we please invite to the podium Professor Adeni, sir? Please, can you come and give a round of applause for him?
It's the problem of to deal with it. We cannot all be here at the same time to hear ourselves. Mr. Chairman, sir, my seniors, my very senior boss, versatile bureaucrats, World Bank representative, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. And of course, I need to congratulate the organizers, my brother Kirele, for this wonderful. Oftentimes, I've had the opportunity of intervening in sessions like this, sometimes on television, with respect to a problem with education. So it's what the family are in, and of course, like my friend here will acknowledge somewhere we are living, So priority is right, So it's important for us to conversing around it. Previous speakers have had philosophy of education, the importance of education. May not believe it's very important for confidence, for building of organization, for the end of capacity of individual, dom is very liberating, and it's individual shape of, in advance, as the case be. But in our own system, there are peculiar, of course, like we, because if a child is not well educated, we know the complication is called employment and employment. Of course, I've discovered as a teacher, is that in the modern times, you have to work extra hard to convince students on the need for him to be educated, be exposed through structured education process, because the times we're in is a technological times where they think that every day is, where they think they know enough through the instrumentality of the computer, through their smartphone. But we also have to tell them that learning goes beyond just the smartphone, just the computer, just the exposure you're having in the media, the things you have to gain, in the classroom. Them want to cut corners. Of course, it's not the challenge for us to continue with the reorientation. But what are the peculiar problems causing our problem? The increasing of children in the country, where there are so many fans in the room. I think we have to highlight. We do not have to run from it. One of the things is population. Population is exploding, and we are not addressing it. It's exploding in the face of limited resources. Limited resources caused by, deeping of, sometimes problem of mismanagement, corruption, the absence of transparency, the absence of accountability, etc., etc. Population is very, very problematic in the sense that government or cannot of enlightenment on creating. I've studied all cultures, and I have a friend on all cultures and religion. There's no culture or religion that asks you to bring to the children cannot take care of. Why bring to the children you can generally not take care of? I do understand that it can be tricky, very sensitive. Of course, it's not beyond government to embark on level of enlightenment. Kind of literary campaign with people who enlighten people on the to take responsibility, not taking responsibility through decision making, through process. You complement us for the states, because the state will be responsible for the care of those children that are young and people. Of course, when a child lack education, we know the eventual outcome, criminality. And of course, can be very dramatic for social and economic development. It also creates hopelessness, nihilism in the person, where you just think that you don't have any reason to exist. And if you do not have a reason to exist because you've been exposed to education, why does person have a reason to exist? And that's why we'll see that that's what we're witnessing in the activities of terrorists down, the way they become obvious subhuman. Referred to as FCT minister. What about the Kunjo Wella? And we're still seeing them as the case could be. But of course, we are seeing that good ones, to make impact in the appropriate areas so that step into El Dorado. Okay, and now I've talked about population. How do we control it? How can we begin to regard population control as an economic tool, not necessarily as a political tool? We still have the problem in this country where we hardly could believe the National Population Commission will tell us when census as something political, one area is going to load itself and say they have more population than the other because of resources. And of change management, in the area of communication, probably through some language programming, let people know that it's not just about politics, it's about economics too, because we need planning. We need to know how many we are, then how many are we going to plan for. The World Bank representative talked about 2030 realization of SDG goals. About that time, how much do we have? How much do we think we can generate? Faced with important sectors of our life, education, primary. And of course, overemphasize this. UNICEF, or is it UNESCO? They've said it severally, and we're falling far beyond. And of course, African countries, even countries in West Africa, much more that we're doing. What is it in our leadership, that makes us think less of education, such that we're not paying attention to it? Perhaps that's how the quest for, we need somebody who is revolutionary, who is reformist, who attention to education, such that at the end of the day we can regard him as somebody who's been transformational. The way we got to enable in England, who once talked about education, that some of us often parrot, as an example of somebody that paid attention to education. And of course, the leadership role that the United Kingdom is playing now in this sphere of education. Some of the best institutions in the world are in the UK, as for privilege, and we know the nature of their pedagogy, how qualitative it can be, irrespective of the actions in different areas. So finally, as a roundup, ladies and gentlemen, better policy formulation, better direction, and improved ethical orientation. But above all things, just like the story around the tortoise, most of the time, every story we tell, we end up with the tortoise. The leadership question will still come up. What role would it play in this matrix? The leader is central to it. The leader is a springboard around which every other thing will rotate. A leader has to be, be determined, to be focused on education so that we can make the change. Thank you very much for your most kind attention.
A round of applause for him. So next I'll be introducing God Bless Otubere, President, ready to lead Africa. Yes, please. Online, and they'll be joining us too shortly.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Protocol. I want to thank my partner, someone I met who was just an impressionable student PRO of the SUG in Uniben many years ago. He was an SSA to governor, and the first day we met, clicked, and we come a long way. That someone had told me that would have today as we have it, I would not believe it. And I'm talking about Taiwo Akerele. Thank you so much, my brother. When I look back at where we're coming from, I know we used to call him Karl Marx. A lot of you don't know that, but it is simply because of his interest in education. Taiwo loved me because I was passionate about the work we were doing at the SUG, and the fact that we wanted to see a responsible SUG that was engaging and not just. I want to thank the Honorable the former minister. My first time meeting you, and I think we have a problem. And the problem is that as young people, we meet our leaders. And I said because leaders in Africa determined by norms. The louder you are, the less they give you. Cannot even imagine that you have this thought about education, sir. And I'm asking myself, why haven't I even met you before? Because you see, I like what you just said. These were not words of fire. These are your words. I understand you're representing him, but I can see the conviction about what education should be. So I'm saying to myself, what is the conduit? What is the pipeline for young people like us to meet people like you? Sir, it doesn't exist. It is the noisemakers, the people who have talks, who get to meet them. And it's sad. Otubere. I'm the global president of Ready to Lead Africa. I was once the coordinator for the No Too Young to Run. I'm in Mandela, Washington, a partner to the US State Department, a believer in Africa. I went through the homes of the founding fathers of America in 2019. In Madison, Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, Washington, and on the walls of their houses, every one of them said these words: I have never seen a people who want to be free that are uneducated. Been, and it will never be. So when men say, oh, Nigeria has our population, and they say, they always tell us, youth, right? I tell people, don't even bank on that. It's the quality of that population. Idea, therefore, is that as we gather here, how do we take the conversation from this podium, from the quality of the minds and the ears and pen and action of the people who can make the decision? If there's one thing I took from the former minister's statement is, it is not enough talk. What we need to do is act. I have a letter on your table right now. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm talking about the DG of the Nigerian Governors Forum. And what are we working on? We're working on one of the biggest peace initiatives in the country in partnership with the NYC. 2023 is coming, and a lot of people tickets for their families to leave because they don't know what would be the outcome. That's what you call. But you see, we are here. We're not leaving. It's our country. We'll fight for it. Do I have the young people with me on this? Do we have you guys? Yes. We will fight for it. Because if you leave and you go be a second-class citizen, but that's not what you will be here. This is your country. So we would be ready to lead not just Nigeria, but we'll lead Africa. Today, I'm glad because I know that in my time, if the guys who are here right now don't make it a criminal offense, we will make it so. You cannot, as a legislator or as a government, build 6 blocks classroom as constituency process anymore. It will be a criminal offense. I'm not joking, sir. I'm not joking. Don't tell me about funds, because you know what we'll do in our time? We will get the community to be involved in education. So if private schools are doing it, it is the truth that it can be done. When you look at America today and you look at the European countries, the only advantage is because they are educated. Education that gives you the power to produce what you consume. Because in this country, we consume what we don't produce. And there is no economy that can sustain itself like that. When we were fighting for the Not Too Young to Run bill, they told us that it was impossible. But we told them, well, we'll just do it. And we did it. When we were fighting for electoral reform, they said it couldn't be done. We said, hold up, there's nothing that's impossible to this man who's standing right here. Because everything about me is that there is nothing that is impossible. So today, as I stand before my elders and my peers, I say to you, everyone, Taiwo Akerele and the Policy House didn't put this together because they just wanted to bring people together. It is simply because we've realized what the problem is: education. Everybody say education. Education. That's it. That's it. That's the difference. That's the difference. The fact that today, when you go to America, I mean, when you drive from the Dulles Airport all the way to Charlottesville, you cannot drive on a certain road if you are driving an SUV and you are alone on that car, rather in that car. You know why? Because they say you are wasting space. But here, we can't even keep traffic light. We can't obey it. And people go scot-free. Today, legislators are building 6 blocks classrooms. And they go and commission it and put it on newspaper, and 6 blocks classrooms with no projector, with no playground, with no library, with no health facility. No. So this is what I always say. It is not the function of not having money. It is not a function of not having resources. Because you know why? Nigerians are not building their living rooms smaller than their toilets. So what does it tell you? We know what to do. Have you ever seen a man's living room that is smaller than his toilet? In this country, have you seen one? So it means that we know. We are just refusing to act. So the take home from today is, as we get out of this door, what would we do differently? Nigerian youths, I'm representing you on this podium. I probably will be the youngest person to speak. But take this home from me. This is your country. This is our time. We're not leaders of tomorrow. We're leaders of today, tomorrow, and the future. And we would invest in education and rally our communities and educate our people. That is the only time that Africa will have its place. That's the only time Nigeria will have its place. So guys, I thank you so much for having me. God bless you. And may God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And I'm looking forward to hosting all of you in January when we unveil the National Youth Peace Symbol, we sign the Youth Peace Accord, and we establish the Peace Building CDS. My name is God Bless Otubere, and may God bless you. Thank you so much.
God bless you. God bless Otubere, sir. I think this should be a manifesto for education. Please, a round of applause for him. We need to change the narrative, yes. This is what it's all about. So at this point, I'll be inviting another panelist. He is no other than Professor Adetoye Shea Adekola. He's the education specialist, World Bank. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Let me stand on existing protocol. Of course, I cannot also do this without just mentioning some people, because at least in Nigerian Palace, you have to give honor to who is due. I'm very, very happy to see my brother, my friend here, Bolaji Abdullahi, the former minister, the former commissioner, everything that we have been doing together in education. And of course, our DG, Governors Forum, and the chairman of this occasion, who is very pleased to be our guy at base. And then, of course, my colleague from the World Bank, Dilip. All of you, I'm very, very pleased to see you here. Let me just say that this program is very apt because of many things that most of the former speakers have said. But the one I would just want to mention, to put it on there, there is also a learning crisis all over Africa. So let me just summarize like that. That is, apart from COVID, apart from security, and apart from all these economic issues, then let's add to it also learning crisis. Because that's the only way people can take us serious, because if not, they are going to, but there's learning crisis at all levels of our education. The second one I want to say is that there's a difference between investment and spending. People, it's okay, they will be spending money like many people have said, but we should always be telling people it's totally different. Investing and spending, they are not the same. Because if you are investing, then people will start looking about the outcomes, about the issue, about all those things that are very dear to us in education, something like inequity in terms of access, in terms of quality, and of course the issue of gender also. All those things are investment, because if you spend on girls, the returns are very, very high. Then what about physically challenged people? You have to invest in them. They may have what it takes to take us. And of course, the location, wherever you are, does not make any difference. So I always tell people, if in Africa, you are a female, you are disabled, you are in rural area, all these things, imagine how your life will be to be able to get across the ladder. Then I also want to say that investing also, you have to think, invest also, but you may not be spending very smartly and wisely. And to spend smartly and wisely, you have to spend on things that are necessary. Because if you don't spend, or if you invest and you are not spending in terms of priority areas or those things that can make a lot of difference in terms of impact. Secondly, are you investing sufficiently? You can invest, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. If you are sick, you need to use Panadol 3, you only use 1. Well, you'll be relieved a little bit, But after some time, the sickness will. So we have to invest on where it's necessary, where it's sufficient. Then the third one is that, are you investing consistently? Yes, we invest to where it's necessary, where it's sufficient, but we are not consistent. In 1 year, you spend enough. Another year, you don't invest. Another time, you don't do this. So we have to issue of consistency. I think that's also part of our problem. Most of the things we are talking about today, if you go and check those people who organized this type of meeting 20 years ago, they might be talking about discriminating yesterday too. So the problem is that even what we need is to look at those things we have been doing well before that we dropped and start looking at it again. We should be humble enough. So we have to be consistent in our investment. But the last and not the least, which many people talk about, have you investing efficiently? All this combined together, it now can lead you to effectiveness. Because it's about impact. It's about difference. When people talk about basic, all those type of things, it's about numbers. To me, it's about investment, it's about impact. It's about where do you have the greatest return. So if you say in primary school, you are having 25 million. In secondary school, you are having 10 million. In university, 5 million. Then which one is give you the investment? So it's about numbers, really. That's the bottom line. Because at the end of the day, it's that number that will touch the life of many people. It's that number that will break the barrier. Because if to get the number, you have to think of the rural areas. You have to think about the physically challenged. So those people, girls. So if they want the numbers to be very high, you'll be able to do this. So when you talk about investment, you are linking resources to outcome. You are linking resources to outcome. You are linking it to strengthen the system that will be able to deliver what you want for your people. And you are also thinking in terms of how do you make sure that your process are being linked to outcome. We just have to continue to think about if we want to invest. It's not the order of priority, but this, I will mention the first one. If you are spending, and my colleagues said it, 80% of your resources on something, are you getting 80% of result? That is teachers. We have to invest in our teachers. And when I talk about teachers, I'm talking about teachers' professional development. Because some states, they even have a lot of teachers. So when we say investment in teachers, let's separate it from salaries too. Because if you break down this investment on teacher, the salary is even occupied and there's no money for what the teachers need to deliver. So that's why we have to be very careful. I always say when they say we need more money on teachers, we need more money, please think even that's available to have what they need to deliver for the children. So we have to that as very important. Teacher professional development. How do you make sure the teachers, anytime they in classrooms, they make a difference in the life of our children? Second half year, digital skills. There's no other way for Africa and Nigeria. It's at the end of this COVID and everything, because at the end of the day, that's what break the barrier of inequity. To make sure that people will be able, wherever they are, whatever your status in life, you'll be able to, the issue of digital infrastructure, to make sure we have all the bandwidth, all the connectivity that we require, and to be able to get things done. And number 3 that I have here, my colleague said it, early childhood. The rate of returns is massive if you invest on children on very early in life. And part of it is even from pregnancy, so that the children can have very good the brain and everything. Because sometimes when we are trying, that's why I say we have to invest smartly and wisely. So the way we invest too late. Because what do you want to happen later? So we have to, so early childhood is very, very important, and it's very, very good to think about investment. Then number 4, there is no way for our young skills, technical and vocational and skills development. And that one is more the issue of education. It's also dealt with migration. It's only in Nigeria or Africa people go to Europe, America, they return them. In Latin America, because you go there with skills, it's cheap labor. They will not return you back because they need you. But when people go there, they don't have the skills. All what you are doing to hang around, and part of it also is about accreditation and certification. That is, if you have a degree today and you go to Europe or US, they know what it means. But if you say you're a mechanic or a tailor, what does that mean? They don't know what you can do. That's why whatever we are going to do under technical and vocational skills development, it must be linked to national skills qualification framework. That is the only way we can help our young people in this country. You see people do acquisition center creating all these things. We all go to university. Is your university not accredited? Are your professors not accredited? Then why are you sending children to where nobody accredits them? Certificate, the people who are even teaching them in all these acquisition centers, nobody even know what they can do. The certificate, everything is in the best. But what we are saying, and World Bank is interested, let's link all this informal sector to something that can be a national framework. Even if you are a professor, what can you do? You are on level 5. Levels. It has nothing to do with your certificate. It has something to do with your competencies. So it's only that we can now attract our youth, so that even if they go to all over Africa, people can know what they can learn and what they do. And then the last one I always tell people here is that there is a correlation between language, literacy, and learning. Our children, many of them are not learning because they are not literate. They are not literate because there is a disconnection between home and school. Luckily, we all can talk before we go to school. Imagine if it is school that we'll have to learn how to talk. Then we are in trouble. But luckily, before we go to school, we are already talking. What we cannot do is that we cannot read or write what we are saying. So language, literacy, and learning is very important. They said I have to stop. But the most important, another thing I want to head with is all our investment, we need it to link it to outcomes, to our results that we want to achieve. So what does that tell us? Yes, we need more money in education. Yes, we need more investment in education. But more investment may not lead to more results. I repeat again, no matter, don't let anybody deceive us or deceive you. You need more investment? Yes, but more investment does not lead to more results. But if you can achieve more result for what you have now, I think some people said it, definitely having more resources will give you to more results, not the other way around. So what we should change our mindset is to be talking about more results, more outcomes. Then when you achieve that with what you have, then it's natural. More money will lead to more results. And with that, we need to be more open, more transparent, and more accountable. We need partnership, collaboration between the state actors and the non-state actors. We have to make sure the government, the federal, the state, the local government, the communities, they must have clear roles and responsibilities in terms of how do they work together to be able to achieve for our children. And the non-state actors, most of people are here, the civil society, the non-governmental organization, the unions. You also have to have your own agenda and work together to see how you can support the state. And then the third one is between the state and, of course, the non-state actors. And once we can now come with something that works for our people at community level, local government, state, and federal, what now remains, scale up, what works, best fit, widen the scope, and and bring innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. You have said it all. Yeah, I mean, so how else can we go? So investment is not just it. There's what a friend calls certificate and certificate. They are not the same thing. Oh yes, they are not the same thing. Because I can remember while I was in school, we did practically everything theory, and after that, we're just left on our own. How do we move? We didn't have anything like compass that could tell us this is the next phase of our lives. We just practically had to learn it on our own. And after seeking for a job, we also observed that employment and employability is another gap that we need to bridge. So I think this conversation is getting very interesting. So at this point, are we ready? I'd like to invite our next panelist. He's Dr. Mike Asikome. He's Assistant Professor of Development Finance, Benson Idahosa University. And he'll be joining us online. Thank you. Dr. Isakome, are you with us?
Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yes, sir, we can hear you. Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I will.
also. They also discovered that the school system also, the federal government, the state government, most often the private institutions. Some of the institutions, the private, the primary and secondary, they don't even have the facility for education. So most of them, they have very little space where they are simply teaching. They don't even have the technological equipment in which you can promote technical development education. So my argument is that the budgeting should also be spread in such a way that you are looking at technical education, vocational education, not the old system where we are happy to learn in our head, knowledge for our heads, and no knowledge for our that is how can administer resources as management of resources. So now I think that should be managed in such a way that not just administration, but you are able to you are going to be able to measure outcome in such a way that education became as production, whereby you are seeing how much you invested, how much is monitored, and what is the outcome. Then in the curriculum, we'll be looking at also what are the national priorities that we are budgeting for. What are we going to produce? Are we producing, looking at the development that engineers will be needed to grow the sectors? Are we looking at, who are we looking at? But you see, find that most of our curriculum, you see people are in school and they are still duplicating so many graduates without actually looking at the focus on what is essential to our national economy. In Africa, Nigeria is still at about 20th ranking in education quality. Small countries like Seychelles, Mauritius, and Nigeria, they are far, far ahead of us. Don't talk of South Africa and Ghana. Kenya. So I think that we should be looking at our curriculum for economic development, to be able to integrate to our curriculum. And then when we're now budgeting, it's on the day of that time we budget, looking at the priorities. By today, I really don't know whether budget has disaggregated. How much goes to science education, how much goes to technology, how much goes to this, and so on and so forth. So I am also looking at it from the point of view that budgeting should be reviewed. It should be directed to national needs, national priorities. So I'm able to allocate funds and such that also monitor and direct all our activities towards achieving of months of closure. You find that when this happens, you really cannot maintain the level that is expected. If you have to spend about 6 months or 5 months outside 1 year, one academic session, and the student now go back to school, you find that there is going to be inadequacy in covering if we are planning, we cannot go and establish universities every day. We are not planning how to fund it, looking into the areas of curriculum development, budgeting, M&E, and then taking priorities to our system in such a way that we redirect our the required direction. Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
whether it's something that's just on paper, because we seem to have like a lot
names are Dr. Abdullahi Abdulkarim Safi. I'm the chairman of TIFA CDI. We are a non-governmental organization. I need to congratulate the international community and Nigerian government on the forthcoming Literacy Day, which is coming on the 8th of September. Education is very, very important and it's very, very paramount. We are keen into it, and our job is to ensure that we support both government and the international partners in doing this job to make sure that we have minimized level of out-of-school children.
When I was in school. When I was in school, we were opportunity to have a good environment. The classes were okay, written materials were available. Compared to now that things are very bad. When I say very bad, I mean very bad. A lot of schools are dilapidated. Most of our pupils now are sitting down on the floor receiving lessons. I really want the government to come in to do what they are supposed to do the needful.
The issue of education in Nigeria is very important. At this critical stage, where we have crisis in almost every sectors of our education. My name is Denja Abdullahi. I'm the immediate past president, Association of Nigerian Authors. I'm a poet, a literary critic, theater director, and a cultural administrator. First, we have to look at the issue of out-of-school children. And the statistics are all there to show that a lot of our students, our people, our children are out of school. And in this modern age where everything is knowledge-based, where everything is based on what you know, what you've learned, and the skills you can apply to develop yourself and society from what you have learned, we don't need to have those numbers of children out of school. Now, the issue has been worsened by the insurgency, the disruption, the banditry that are prevalent in some parts of the country. Now, a lot of our children are out of school because of this unresolved societal crisis. So it is very important for our leaders to resolve those crises so that our children can go back to school. Then we can also link this issue of out-of-school children to the value we place on education, because our society is not valuing education as it should. We have various organs of government that are supposed to take care of various sectors of our educational system. For example, if you go to the Federal Ministry of Education, you can count up to about 30 parastatals that are under that ministry that are minding one form of education or the other: primary school education, secondary school education, tertiary education, NUC. We have parastat that is responsible for teachers' development and registration. So it's not that we don't have the system. The systems are all, the structures are all there. But the implementation of these government agencies to do the work they've been established to do is the problem. For example, when we talk of banditry or what we normally attribute to the headers, there is National Commission for Nomadic Education, for God's sake. And what is the function of this commission? Is to make sure the Fulani pastoralists, the maritime people that are itinerant, should get some value of education as they move from place to place. If they've been well educated, by now, we won't have this problem. Knowledge has to be transmitted into the physical in terms of development, progress for all in the country.
My name is Taiwo Akerele. I'm the Executive Director of TIFA CDI Nigeria. We want to welcome you to the celebration of the International Literacy Day, which has been set aside by UNESCO on an annual basis to celebrate and to mark and draw attention to the challenge of illiteracy across the world. You will recall that the recently released data concerning out-of-school children in the world indicates very clearly that 1 out of 5 out-of-school children in the world is a Nigerian child. And that accounts for why we have many vulnerable young people who are being recruited by Boko Haram, by terrorists and bandits. It is on the basis of this we are using this opportunity to clamor for more focus on investment in basic education, particularly in the area of infrastructure, the area of teacher training, curriculum review, technology, and other parts and components of the educational ecosystem. We are using this opportunity to call on government to increase more funding on teacher training, to increase more funding on infrastructure, and to increase more funding on pedagogy and curriculum review. We call on our development partners to support the Nigerian government to ensure that new trends and model of education is introduced into the Nigerian government and Nigerian educational system. We're also using this opportunity to call on the Nigerian government to partner with CSO, particularly in third-party monitoring of appropriation for budget. We're also saying that there should be a difference between investment in education and spending on education. In TIFA CDI, we will continue to advocate for investment in education. We'll continue to advocate for partnership. We'll continue to advocate for effectiveness of the appropriation system. It is on this basis I want to thank you all and welcome to the celebration of the 2022 International Literacy Day.
Dr. Abdullahi Abdulkarim Safi. I'm the chairman of TIFA CDI. We are a non-governmental organization. I need to congratulate the international community and Nigerian government on the forthcoming Literacy Day, which is coming on the 8th of September. Education is very, very important and it's very, very paramount. We are keen into it, and our job is to ensure that we support both government and the international partners in doing this job to make sure that we have minimized level of out-of-school children.
This is when I was in school. When I was in school, we were opportunity to have a good environment. The classes were okay. Written materials were available. Compared to now that things are very bad. When I say very bad, I mean very bad. A lot of schools are dilapidated. Most of our pupils now are sitting down on the floor receiving lessons. I really want the government to come in to do what they are supposed to do the needful.
The issue of education in Nigeria is very important. At this critical stage, where we have crisis in almost every sectors of our education. My name is Denja Abdullahi. I'm the immediate past president, Association of Nigerian Authors. I'm a poet, a literary critic, theater director, and a cultural administrator. First, we have to look at the issue of out-of-school children. And the statistics are all there to show that a lot of our students, our people, our children are out of school. And in this modern age where everything is knowledge-based, where everything is based on what you know, what you've learned, and the skills you can apply to develop yourself and society from what you have learned, we don't need to have those numbers of children out of school. Now, the issue has been worsened by the insurgency, the disruption, the banditry that are prevalent in some parts of the country. Now, a lot of our children are out of school because of this unresolved societal crisis. So it is very important for our leaders to resolve those crises so that our children can go back to school. Then we can also link
according to the definition.
But the sound is not. Yeah, so they come back from the ranking.
Dr. Abdullahi Abdulkarim Safi. I'm the chairman of TIFA CDI. We are a non-governmental organization. I need to congratulate the international community and Nigerian government on the forthcoming Literacy Day, which is coming on the 8th of September. Education is very, very important and it's very, very paramount. We are keen into it, and our job is to ensure that we support both government and the international partners in doing this job to make sure that we have minimized level of out-of-school children.
This is when I was in school. When I was in school, we were opportunity to have a good environment. The classes were okay, written materials were available. Compared to now that things are very bad. When I say very bad, I mean very bad. A lot of schools are dilapidated. Most of our pupils now are sitting down on the floor receiving lessons. I really want the government to come in to do what they are supposed to do the needful.
The issue of education in Nigeria is very important. At this critical stage, where we have crisis in almost every sectors of our education. My name is Denja Abdullahi. I'm the immediate past president, Association of Nigerian Authors. I'm a poet, a literary critic, theater director, and a cultural administrator. First, we have to look at the issue of out-of-school children. And the statistics are all there to show that a lot of our students, our people, our children are out of school. And in this modern age where everything is knowledge-based, where everything is based on what you know, what you've learned, and the skills you can apply to develop yourself and society from what you have learned, we don't need to have those numbers of children out of school. Now, the issue has been worsened by the insurgency, the disruption, the banditry that are prevalent in some parts of the country. Now, a lot of our children are out of school because of this unresolved societal crisis. So it is very important for our leaders to resolve those crises so that our children can go back to school. Then we can also link this issue of out-of-school children to the value we place on education, because our society is not valuing education as it should. We have various organs of government that are supposed to take care of various sectors of our educational system. For example, if you go to the Federal Ministry of Education, you can count up to about 30 parastatals that are under that ministry that are minding one form of education or the other: primary school education, secondary school education, tertiary education, NUC. We have parastatal that is responsible for teachers' development and registration. So it's not that we don't have the system. The systems are, the structures are all there. But the implementation of these government agencies to do the work they've been established to do is the problem. For example, when we talk of banditry, or what we normally attribute to the headers, there is National Commission for Nomadic Education, for God's sake. And what is the function of this commission? Is to make sure the Fulani pastoralists, the maritime people that are itinerant, should get some value of education as they move from place to place. If they've been well educated, by now, we won't have this problem. Knowledge has to be transmitted into the physical in terms of development, progress for all in the country.
My name is Taiwo Akerele. I'm the Executive Director of TIFAS CDI Nigeria. I want to welcome you to the celebration of the International Literacy Day, which has been set aside by UNESCO on an annual basis to celebrate and to mark and draw attention to the challenge of illiteracy across the world. You will recall that the recently released data concerning out-of-school children in the world indicates very clearly that 1 out of 5 out-of-school children in the world is a Nigerian child. And that accounts for why we have many vulnerable young people who are being recruited by Boko Haram, by terrorists and bandits. It is on the basis of this, we are using this opportunity to clamor for more focus on investment in basic education, particularly in the area of infrastructure, the area of teacher training, curriculum review, technology, and other parts and components of the educational ecosystem. We are using this opportunity to call on government to increase more funding on teacher training, to increase more funding on infrastructure, and to increase more funding on pedagogy and curriculum review. We call on
Dr. Abdullahi Abdulkarim Safi. I'm the chairman of TIFAS CDI. We are a non-governmental organization. I need to congratulate the international community and Nigerian government on the forthcoming Literacy Day, which is coming on the 8th of September. Education is very, very important and it's very, very paramount. We are keen into it, and our job is to ensure that we support both government and the international partners in doing this job to make sure that we have minimized level of out-of-school children.
This is when I was in school. When I was in school, we were opportunity to have a good environment. The classes were okay, written materials were available. Compared to now that things are very bad. When I say very bad, I mean very bad. A lot of schools are dilapidated. Most of our pupils now are sitting down on the floor receiving lessons. I really want the government to come in to do what they are supposed to do the needful.
The issue of education in Nigeria is very important. At this critical stage, where we have crisis in almost every sectors of our education. My name is Denja Abdullahi. I'm the immediate past president, Association of Nigerian Authors. I'm a poet, a literary critic, theater director, and a cultural administrator. First, we have to look at the issue of out-of-school children. And the statistics are all there to show that a lot of our students, our people, our children are out of school. And in this modern age where everything is knowledge-based, where everything is based on what you know, what you've learned, and the skills you can apply to develop yourself and society from what you have learned, we don't need to have those numbers of children out of school. Now, the issue has been worsened by the insurgency, the disruption, the banditry that are prevalent in some parts of the country. Now, a lot of our children are out of school because of this unresolved societal crisis. So it is very important for our leaders to resolve those crises so that our children can go back to school. Then we can also link this issue of out-of-school children to the value we place on education, because our society is not valuing education as it should. We have various organs of government that are supposed to take care of various sectors of our educational system. For example, if you go to the Federal Ministry of Education, you can count up to about 30 parastatals that are under that ministry that are minding one form of education or the other, primary school education, secondary school education, tertiary education, NUC. We have Parasite that is responsible for teachers' development and registration. So it's not that we don't have a system. The systems are all, the structures are all there. But the implementation of these government agencies to do the work they've been established to do is the problem. For example, when we talk of banditry or what we normally attribute to the headers, there is National Commission for Nomadic Education, for God's sake. And what is the function of this commission? Is to make sure the Fulani pastoralists, the maritime people that are itinerant, should get some value of education as they move from place to place. If they've been well educated, by now, we won't have this problem. Knowledge has to be transmitted into the physical in terms of development, progress for all in the country.
My name is Taiwo Akerele. I'm the Executive Director of TIFA CDI Nigeria. We want to welcome you to the celebration of the International Literacy Day, which has been set aside by UNESCO on an annual basis to celebrate and to mark and draw attention to the challenge of illiteracy across the world. You will recall that the recently released data concerning out-of-school children in the world indicates very clearly that 1 out of 5 out-of-school children in the world is a Nigerian child. And that accounts for why we have many vulnerable young people who are being recruited by Boko Haram, by terrorists and bandits. It is on the basis of this we are using this opportunity to clamor for more focus on investment in basic education, particularly in the area of infrastructure, the area of teacher training, curriculum review, technology, and other parts and components of the educational ecosystem. We are using this opportunity to call on government to increase more funding on teacher training, to increase more funding on infrastructure, and to increase more funding on pedagogy and curriculum review. We call on our development partners to support the Nigerian government to ensure that new trends and model of education is introduced into the Nigerian government and Nigerian educational system. We're also using this opportunity to call on the Nigerian government to partner with CSO, particularly in third-party monitoring of appropriation for budget. We're also saying that there should be a difference between investment in education and spending on education. In TIFA CDI, we will continue to advocate for investment in education. We'll continue to advocate for partnership. We'll continue to advocate for effectiveness of the appropriation system. It is on this basis I want to thank you all and welcome to the celebration of the 2022 International Literacy Day.